any of you want nursing credit for this? Hands up if you do, and Barbara will be really gracious to hand you the paper that you need. And if you don't have your license memorized, no big deal. When you get the certificate, you can write that in. Make sure you give me a legible email, because I only send them out by email. All right. One rule when I'm speaking. I told the people at Ephesus last night what that was. What's the rule when I'm speaking? You can get up and move around anytime you want to. Got it? People usually come up to me, one or two, and they'll say, you know, I really have a brain that listens better when I'm standing, but I didn't want to bother you. Hello, I'm not visual. I will not see you get up and move around. I won't. Somebody came up to me the other day and said, I apologize for arriving late. I didn't know she arrived late. I don't see that kind of detail. Now, if you get up and knock a pew over, you'll get my attention. But other than that, I won't even notice. Okay, we're going to do 2 sections this afternoon. The first one from now till, I don't know, 5 to 3 or something like that. And we'll take a short break. And then we'll do the second one. And Barbara asks if I will take some questions. It depends whether we get done ahead of time or not. And I never know when I'm going to be done. It's the honest truth. Anywhere I speak, I tell the Lord, just have me say what I need to say, and sometimes it takes longer than others. So if it doesn't take as long, we'll have some questions. If I don't know anything about your question, I will tell you immediately. I've learned it's not a good idea to pretend you know about the brain if you don't. And we hardly know anything about the brain, relatively speaking. Do you realize that we did not know till the fall of 2015 that the brain had its own immune system? We thought, everybody thought, that the highest place in the body where you had an immune system organ was, about your nose level, your adenoids and tonsils and whatever else. We had no idea that the 3 meninges, the 3 layers of the brain that cover and protect it, were filled with immune system vessels. I mean, come on, this is, 2015. So I'm wondering what else we don't know. It's kind of exciting, actually. All right, let's go. Let's start with what I call brain benders. These are age-proofing exercises. They use your whole brain to solve. How many of you have not done these before? Okay, 30 seconds on how they work. Language is loaded in the left hemisphere, pretty much regardless of handedness. And with your left hemisphere, you can read and recognize the letters. You can put them together to make words. With your right hemisphere, you are looking at the spatial, S-P-A-T-I-A-L, the spatial relationships. I was speaking in Louisiana, I think, and I made the comment that the right hemisphere was spatial. This guy in the front looks at the woman next to him and said, I told you we were special. So you are, but I'm talking about spatial. And it looks at the relationship of the letters to each other and so on and so forth. So their whole brain, there's hundreds of them on my website, free. Do them, 10 minutes a day. Your brain will love you. So each little box is its own puzzle. And the brain doesn't care whether letters go forwards or words go forwards or backwards. You could read an entire book with all of the words written backwards, would not bother the brain. So I sometimes turn things around just to give your brain more practice. So what would this stand for? What's the word? All right. The word is out of touch. What else? Out back works very well. I love to hear the things that brains come up with from the same puzzle. And there's no right or wrong. There's just what my brain thought of. Second on the left. Chinese checkers. What else? I was lecturing in China. And there was obviously somebody in the audience who was not Chinese. So somebody said Chinese checkers, and I was getting ready to move on, and that voice said, "What about check on the Chinese?" Perfectly good puzzle solution. Third on the left, word in a word. One word starts here and goes this way, and one word starts here and goes this way. Towel is one of the words. Good. Throw in the towel. There you go. Everybody see that? Excellent. Fourth on the left. Sign on the dotted line. And somebody said nobody signed on the dotted line. And that's just as good an answer. Top right. Timing is what? Good. Second on the right. Look on the bright side. Third on the right. Light at the end of the... You guys are good. The only people I've ever seen beat you was 150 convicts in an all-male prison. And they're faster than anybody in the world that's ever done these. I mean, it was amazing. I was asked to go lecture in this penitentiary, and I'd never done that before. I haven't done it since either. It was quite an experience. You know, they go through 3 checkpoints, and pretty soon you basically have a few of your clothes left on, and that's it. And then you have to walk across this big open space, and they plastered a bright red heart on the outside of my jacket, and they said, whatever you do, do not start running, because the sharpshooters in the towers will aim for this. And I'm thinking, Lord, remind me again what I'm doing here. So then we get in the prison, and we're walking down what they call Main Street. Gave me a whole list of rules. I'm not so big on rules, but I got this whole list of rules. First one was, walk straight ahead, do not smile, do not look at anyone. Okay, so I walked way down to the end and met the chaplain and went into the chapel, which probably seated about maybe 130, 40 people. Chaplain says to me, go up on the platform and sit down and be quiet. Okay, so I did that. 7 o'clock in the evening, there's this big buzzer. He said they've just opened the cells. And pretty soon, all come in these convicts. They walk in, sit down, fold their arms, and they're looking at me like this. Don't know what I'm doing here, Lord. Chaplain gets up, introduces me. Not a flicker in the audience. I stood up, and this is what I said. Well, gentlemen, this is my first experience sharing brain function information in a penitentiary. Kind of puts a different spin on the words captive audience. But I didn't just say that, did I? A guy about half again as big as Bill, which is just humongous. Bright red hair, bright red beard sitting in the middle. He slapped his thigh, and I thought a rifle had gone off. He says, I think she's going to be okay, boys. So I started with brain benders, and I'm not kidding you. I could not get to the next one fast enough when there were 2 or 3 answers, and they were on the next one, faster than anybody, any group I've ever talked to before. We finished in like 1 3/4 seconds, and I said, wow, I've never, ever had anybody solve these that quick. the beard goes, well, we aren't stupid. Little pipsqueak over in the corner says, yes, we are. We're in jail. It was an amazing experience. But when I left and finally collected all my belongings, I have not been back. Okay, we did this one, right? Last one on the right. Come on, you can do it. Sit where? Sit down, sit above, okay. Sit up, okay. Sit on what? Yes, 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 sit on the sidelines. Good job. That one's hard for people for some reason. Okay, what do you see first? Okay, who saw the profiles first? Okay, that's all that's there. There is no vase there. There are two cutouts against a white background. There is no vase. But here's the takeaway. The left hemisphere always wants to explain everything. And it says, are you an idiot? There's a vase there. No, there isn't. There are only two profiles. So when you are sure about something, think again. Because the left hemisphere wants to come up with the solution, and it might not be accurate. Now, here is the figure from which this was taken. Now, what do you see first? Who still saw the faces first? All right. How many saw the vase first? Okay, can you see the difference? This is colored three-dimensional. But you still can see the profiles if you're looking carefully. All right. Human brains are more alike than they are different. We talked about that this morning. However, each one, just like fingerprints, is slightly different. Even the brains of identical so-called twins are not identical. And that one of the reasons for that is that you change the very structure of your brain with every single thought you think. And even twins never think of exactly identical thoughts. So their brains are not identical. And we actually get more different as we get older because we've got more years to think different thoughts. So you never can really read another person's mind. You can get some idea by their behaviors and facial expressions, but you can't read their minds. And when I hear people say, I know exactly how you feel, they're lying. And lying suppresses the immune system, so I don't advocate that. You can have some idea based on your experience. When my father died, who was the most important person in my life to date on this planet, people would come up to me and say, I know exactly how you feel now that your father's died. And I'm thinking, no, you don't. You have no idea how I feel. I don't know what kind of relationship you had with your father. You don't know. And it was not comforting. And it was so painful for me, I never shed a tear for 3 solid months. And then one day a woman showed up in my office at the hospital and said, I just got back from 3 months in the Solomon Islands and I heard your father died. I know how close you were to him. I cannot imagine what his death feels like. Oh, the dam broke. Somebody actually understood and used the words. So you cannot know how someone else feels. So what are the takeaways? Stop expecting another brain to understand yours, because trust me, you don't even understand your own. Because if you did, you'd be consistently successful, because all the secrets of success are loaded in the brain. Paul, avoid meaningless argument and foolish controversy, or vice versa. I'm never sure which is which. When two people argue, both of them think they really know. And if they talk louder and longer and are very persuasive, if not abusive, controlling and angry, maybe this idiot of another brain will get it the way they do. Now, arguing is never, ever productive, so stop it. And understanding more about brain function has totally changed my life for the better. So let's talk a little bit about this. Your brain is the size of about your 2 fists. I mentioned that last night, lecturing to a group of freshmen in college. Hunk in the back stands up and says, "Look how big my hands are." Okay, I'm not visual, but I could actually see that. He said, "I must be really, really smart." Einstein had a relatively very small brain. It's not the size of your brain, it's the number of fingers, dendrites on each neuron you have and the connections they make. It takes, the brain matures from the back to the front, I'm sure you know that. It takes a long time to mature compared to the body. So you want to be really careful about the decisions you make before you are in your late 20s. Because your brain is going to be developed, but it won't be mature. And, you know, as a preacher's kid, I was a little judgmental. Hate to admit that now, but that was my model. I mean, the church members were all judgmental, right? So I wondered why in the world Christ did not start his earthly ministry till he was 30. What a waste of time. You know, if he had just gotten on the ball and started when he was 19, look what he could have done. And then we find out that the prefrontal cortex is not done until mid to late 20s. So he had to have his brain done before he could finally discriminate between all the tests he had to undergo. Here's a drawing. Daniel Levitin was one of the first to point out that the prefrontal cortex doesn't develop until after age 20. You know, 80% of a child's brain is developed by the age of 3, but it's not mature for almost another 25, 30 years. So you can see that this is a side view, prefrontal cortex up here. This is a top view, and there's not much in the way of blue there, which signifies the maturation. So it's getting down here to the late 20s before you really start seeing that those parts of the brain mature. I wished I'd known that. Got married when I was 19. My corpus callosum wasn't even paved. Forget the prefrontal cortex being done. But I was tired of being a minister's kid, and I'm serious. So I married the second person that asked me. I mean, how bad could it be? Not my best choice. So the bridges that connect the right and the left, they do have to be those long axons, you know. If you think of your hand as a neuron, palm, cell body, thumb is the axon, how information leaves the cell, all kinds of fingers, dendrites that pull information in, 10,000 on a neuron if you've got an enriched brain. So it has to be wrapped with myelin before the information can go at 200 to 600 miles an hour. That takes time. So the corpus callosum, which is one of those main bridges, isn't even paved till age 20 or 21. So up until then, the brain is always at risk for shorting out because it's not completely paved. And we look at these young people whose bodies are all grown up, we think their brains are done. And then we're surprised when they do ridiculous things. So when a young person comes up and talks to me, especially a young man, I'll look at him and he'll ask me a question and I'll stop and I'll say, "How old are you?" So we were talking about this at a university. This hunk comes up to me. He says, "You're wrong." I said, well, I might be. In what particular do you think I'm in error? Well, he says, I'm 17. I didn't even have to ask him. He says, I know exactly who I'm going to marry. Don't have to wait till mid to late 20s. I said, really? How long have you known who you're going to marry? 3 months. I said, 4 months ago. Where were you in your life? Oh, thought I was going to marry somebody else, but that didn't work out. I said, I would slow down if I were you. If you can help young people understand that the paving process, fiber optics, whatever metaphor you want to use, it's really important to have that done and get all those potholes filled in before information smoothly and accurately and predictably can cross those highways. Sometimes you can get them to slow down. So here's the 3 functional layers. We've talked about that. The first, or reptilian layer, the second, or mammalian layer, and remember, both of those are subconscious and they don't use language. The third layer is the home of consciousness, but you don't really still have much conscious awareness of what goes on in the brain unless you work on that. So until this part starts getting really done, that's when you have a little bit more control over the choices that you want to make, a little bit more practice, willpower's loaded there, and so on. PET scans. I just love what we learn from PET scans. Researchers were using positron emission tomography, and they were asking people questions and then watching in the brain where in the brain the cells that would answer that question start firing. And of course, they're printed out changing color. So they began to notice that if the subject, the participant, was above the age of 21, you asked them a question and they stayed up in the third layer to answer it. If the individuals were below age 21, they tend to downshift immediately into the mammalian layer, which the researchers take to mean the difference in maturation of those 2 parts of the brain in that age. Then they noticed, if they began the question with the word why, every brain downshifted into the emotional layer. And they puzzled about that. And finally, they came to the conclusion that that was because in every Western language, at least, when you say to somebody, why'd you do that? Or, why didn't you do that? It creates a level of fear. And what happens to the brain when you feel unsafe? The brain downshifts. So the takeaway is this: get why out of your vocabulary, because you are triggering fear in every brain to whom you ask a why question. Now that was hard for me because I was born being asked why. My mother wanted one child. It would be a boy. It would be born on my father's birthday. She forgot to tell me. So I was born female and 5 days late. She went into 4 months of postpartum depression. Don't know if they were related, but who knows. I grew up being asked why. Find a different way to elicit what you want to know so that you avoid that downshifting. It's pretty critical. I realized that I was raising my 3 stepsons. I married a man who had 3 little boys, custody of them, because their mother had run off with somebody else. They were 1, 2, and 3 when we started dating, and I finally married him when they were 3, 4, and 5, and it was a shock. Here's this professional woman, suddenly, 24 hours a day, a mother of 3 little boys, I loved them to distraction, or I never would have married their father. But I'd been asking them why. So I says to them, okay, guys, I'm making some changes and you need to help me. I've been asking you why. Why didn't you do your homework? Why didn't you take out the garbage? Why are you wearing that shirt? So on. I said, I'm going to stop using why, and here's the deal. Bought a piggy bank. It's on the dining room table. If I ask you a why question, and you catch me before I catch myself, I'll put $1 in the piggy bank. I don't know, 6 months from now, we'll go to Chuck E. Cheese. It's not the best food in the world, but, you know, it's kind of fun to go there with all that automation and so on. So we'll go get pizza. I tell you, I never had 3 boys listen to me so carefully. They listened to me before I said anything. We went for pizza 3 times the first week. Pretty ingrained, but I rarely ask the why question now. And you know what? They don't ask that of their kids. It's amazing. Brain neurons probably form the basis for IQ. IQ is just one measure of intelligence. I think we've overrated it, but nevertheless, it's used. About 86 billion neurons in the brain, give or take a few billion. We think they're arranged in the brain in fields of about 1 million neurons per field. And those fields are continually vibrating. All of the neurons in one field are vibrating at the same frequency. And like radio transmitters, they send their frequency and they receive the frequency of others. So what does that mean? It means you'll meet some people and you'll feel like you know them forever. Does that happen to you? Just really comfortable with them initially. And you might not want to take them home with you. It just means that your brain has recognized commonality of frequencies, which can be a good start to a friendship, but you gotta ask some other questions first. And I'm sure that you've met people and nothing happened, or, felt really uncomfortable. I've even gone and sat down in a large auditorium, felt uncomfortable, got up and moved, and felt fine. So I must have been sitting somewhere around somebody who was putting out negative energy. Don't know what it was about, but I'll move if I don't feel comfortable. Your heart, at least 40,000 neurons, which is pretty good for a little tiny organ that we didn't think had any neurons in. And your heart neurons likely form the basis for emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is pretty important. It's not emotions and feelings, but it is the skills that you use to manage them. And it has everything to do with your success in life. So the success formula is IQ plus EQ equals SQ. But IQ contributes 20% maybe. Some people are now saying it may only be as much as 10%. EQ, 80% or more. So work on your EQ. The current estimates are 50% of all the problems you have in life are of your own making. So if you can raise your EQ and avoid conflict and problems, and you've just dropped, as I said last night, 50% of the potatoes off the back of your pickup truck, your load is going to feel pretty light. Neurons in your gastrointestinal tract, did not know that, plus 90% of all your serotonin, 50% of all your dopamine. Get that. It's just amazing. Your enteric nervous system is being called your second brain because it's got so many neurons. So if you get an upset stomach, often get a headache. And if you get a headache, sometimes you don't feel like eating. Don't even feel like opening your eyes. If you get too much serotonin, you're going to trigger GI symptoms, often nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, so on. But if you don't get enough, then you have problems with sleep. You have trouble being joyful and cheerful. And what we're learning about the brain is it works best when your life is in balance. And therefore, we need to keep our lives in balance so all of this intricate mechanism works properly. A lot of people on the West Coast are now calling what used to be irritable bowel syndrome an enteric neuropathy, meaning the neurons in your gut are unhappy. And it's changing the way that doctors are treating those conditions. Because white bread, milk, and white rice are probably not going to do a thing for your neurons. And they're going to make, it's not quality food. And that's how a lot of IBS has been treated. So let's talk about electromagnetic energy, because I love this. First time, however, I presented this in a church, I thought potluck was going to end up on me as I walked out, because people were saying, "Aren't you teaching New Age here?" I said, "Sure, I'm teaching New Age. This is the age of the brain. It's the 21st century. What do you think? I'm not teaching old age, I'm teaching New Age. But I'm not teaching New Age theology. There's a difference." "Well, we have friends who are New Agers, and they talk about this stuff." And I said, "Yeah, they're a few miles down the road ahead of you, aren't they?" Just because they were smart enough to recognize the value of brain function information doesn't make the information New Age. But it took me a little while to help people see that. So electromagnetic energy is a form of radiation energy, very much like the rays of the sun. The neurons continually, if they're alive, put out electromagnetic energy, or M energy, as we call it. That's what part of the vibration is about. Quantum physics. I don't know a lot about quantum physics, but I tell you, I'm really finding it interesting what I'm learning. Quantum physics says that electromagnetic energy is never, ever destroyed. Now we're wondering where it goes. It leaves your body at the speed of light. It's measurable by a whole bunch of different kinds of equipment. We can measure it at least 15 feet out from the body. If the machine is within 3 feet of your body, you don't even have to have it touching your body. And you can get a pattern of electromagnetic energy, which I think is really pretty exciting. So when I sit down in a large room and feel uncomfortable, I know there's somebody within about 3 feet of me that's not having a good day. And I prefer, if possible, to avoid subjecting my brain and body to negative electromagnetic energy. So I'll get up and move. And usually it only takes one move. One time I had to do it 3 times, but that's okay. Gave me a little exercise. Because if you pay attention, your body is very sensitive. Your brain picks this up. You don't realize what's happening. You just feel a little uncomfortable sometimes. Or you don't want to particularly be around that person. Most of the time we get this beaten out of us in childhood, metaphorically at least. I went to a real school. My mom homeschooled me K through 5 because she was a teacher. They put me in a regular school for the 6th grade. That was not the most fun year I ever had, because I'd never been in a school before. I was used to getting my work done in a couple, 3 hours and having plenty of time to practice my musical instruments and explore in the gully behind our house and all this. You know, a whole day in school was absolutely exhausting. The teacher was a male, and if I got anywhere near that man, my whole body crawled. My skin just felt awful. I didn't know what that was about. I went home and told my parents, I don't like the teacher. Okay, what words am I going to use? My dad says, what do you mean you don't like the teacher? I said, I don't feel good when he comes close to my desk. I get a pain in my stomach. My mother says, oh, stop being silly. I'm sure there's not a thing wrong with him. You're just not used to a different teacher. So I kept away from him when I could. But I never liked him, never felt good around him. I'm surprised I kept paying attention to the way my body felt. A few times I wish I had paid better attention. Fast forward like 37 years. Girl called me on the phone who was a student with me then. And she said, hi, we haven't talked for a long time. I said, Carol, wonderful to hear from you. Well, she says, I got a piece of news for you. I said, what? Well, she said, remember the teacher you didn't like in 6th grade? I said, duh. She said, he just died. I said, well, you know, what am I going to say? Couldn't happen to a nicer person. She says, but here's the news. We found out that when he was teaching that year in 6th grade, that was his 5th school to which he had been moved because of inappropriately touching female students in previous schools. And we dishonor a child's intuition, and then when they really need it, they have disrespected it because people told them they were crazy. So we need to take another look at that. This energy forms an energy field around your body. Now, there are a few people on this planet who claim that they can see that energy, and I'm not saying they can't, because every brain is different. I don't see the energy. I sense it, but I don't see it. But some people actually say they see it. But you can take pictures of a body, person standing there, they've got to be alive, of course, and you'll get a picture of what this energy looks like, and it's fascinating. One of the pictures I looked at, see this color and light right here would be the electromagnetic energy that's being released out of the person's hand. And sometimes it's quite narrow and much darker than that. And the researchers say that means the person's energy is very negative. They must be thinking negative thoughts, because negative thoughts result in negative electromagnetic energy. Positive thoughts result in positive electromagnetic energy. I haven't found anything in between. And sometimes you see this beautiful wide, 8-10 inches wide, of light, pulsating color all around the person's body. And the researchers will say, they're having a really good day. Positive thinking. So it's real. And those of you who have read, can't remember what book it's in the Spirit of Prophecy, maybe Spiritual Gifts, 2 little black thick books. Ellen G. White talks about the fact that Adam and Eve had this covering of light, which we believe was just the electromagnetic energy. And they could walk over to a plant, and they could stand there so that this light shone on the plant and they could see photosynthesis and the processes going on inside the plant. So if we live long enough on this planet, maybe we will get more sophisticated equipment that can tell us more than we know now, but what we know now, I think, is staggering. The heart generates the largest electromagnetic field in the body. You know, 15 years ago, we knew the neurons put out electromagnetic energy, but we didn't even know there were neurons in the heart. That's fairly recent research from McGill University in Montreal. And Heart Math, some of you are familiar with that corporation in the United States. They're studying neurons in the heart. And Linda Cavanis loved that. She centered her whole career around the heart and neurons. He says, one of the researchers, the electrical field of the heart, as measured in an electrocardiogram, is about 60 times greater in amplitude than the brain waves recorded in an EEG. So both the heart neurons and the brain neurons are putting out this energy, but the heart neurons give you a much greater amplitude when they do their pattern. He also says that the magnetic component of the heart's field, which is around 100 times stronger than that produced by the brain, is not impeded by tissues, meaning it just goes right through bone, body tissue, whatever. It can be measured several feet away from the body. You don't even have to touch the body, and we've talked about that. So the brain detects, and the heart may detect also at a subconscious level, but the brain detects and responds to M energy on a subconscious level. And animals and children are especially sensitive to this, unless and until we teach our children to disregard what their bodies are telling them. At one point in my life, I had a poodle. I wanted a dog growing up really badly. But my father, the preacher, said it was impractical because we were gone a lot. I mean, we'd be all day at church. What's the dog going to do? Well, that didn't seem like a problem, but couldn't have a dog. So I got married, went down to the animal shelter, and brought home a dog. Cute little miniature poodle, white. At the animal shelter, that dog looked at me like I was an ice cream sundae. Could not wait to go home with me. Brought the dog home, named her Karma. Don't ask me why, just liked the name. Found out later what it meant. My mother was horrified. So I brought Karma home. And my husband came home from work, and I stopped existing. She liked his electromagnetic energy better. Don't ask me the reason, but, you know, we have different affinities. So when she met him, I no longer existed. I didn't mind that because he was gone a lot of the time. When he was gone, she was mine. When he was home, she was his. I learned very quickly that I could tell the kind of day he had at the office just by watching her about the time he was due to get home. And if she was at the garage door, and if her little tail was going like this, and if she was, he'd had a good day, we were going to have a great evening. If, on the other hand, she didn't go anywhere near the garage door. Instead, she turned around and went down the hallway toward the master bedroom and crawled under the bed. I joined her because I knew he hadn't had a good day. And he would need 15 or 20 minutes in his cave, metaphorically, before I stuck my nose out. So we'd have a good time under the bed. She was happy to be there with me. And then when she started edging toward the bed, stuck her nose out, I knew that the electromagnetic energy was changing. He was feeling pretty good. She'd crawl out, I'd crawl out, and sure enough, we'd have a fine evening. But until I learned that, it wasn't too pleasant sometimes. So, one of the most marvelous experiences that I know, which helped me understand the power of touch. Researchers took 2 individuals. So far, the only experiments I've read have been with people who were good friends, spouses, loved each other. One is on the side of the lab over here, and the other one's over there, and they're all hooked up to equipment. And the first thing they track is the brain electromagnetic waves. And they're 2 different patterns. And then they track the heart energy patterns, 2 different patterns. So you have 2 individuals, 4 patterns. Now they bring them to the middle of the lab and ask them to hold hands, put an arm around each other, touch each other somehow. And now they start watching what happens to these patterns. And the first thing that happens, well, first of all, which organ puts out the strongest energy, heart or brain? Heart. So the first thing they notice is a change in the heart patterns, and guess what? They synchronize. Give them another 30 seconds, minute, and the brain pattern synchronizes. Now you have 2 people, 2 patterns. Give them another 30 seconds, and those 2 patterns synchronize into 1. So from 2 people, 4 patterns, you get 2 people to 1 pattern. And when I read in Scripture about how little children love to be around Christ, I think their patterns synchronized with His. They felt good around Him. And it will be interesting to see how we feel when we get in His presence. Sometimes, as I said, you will sense negative energy from another person, especially counselors, physicians, people in the medical field, and teachers and preachers and so on. I pay attention to that because counselors have a pretty high suicide rate. And we're learning fabulous information about suicide. Maybe next time I come back we can talk about that, because it's way different than we thought it was. But if you take all that negative energy in, then you have to get rid of it, because your body absorbs it. So I have a metaphor that works for me. I don't think it blocks it 100%, but it really does seem to help. And you might want to come up with your own metaphor. I perceive that when anyone talks to me, especially if they're within my 3 feet, I perceive that they are speaking to me through a big glass tube. But as that glass tube comes toward me, it turns and goes by me. I can still see, hear, sense how they are feeling, but I picture the electromagnetic energy blowing out the end of the tube over there. And under the stress equation that only 20% of any negative effect to your brain and body about a dysfunctional situation is due to the situation, and 80% is due to what you think about the situation, then I am decreasing how much I'm actually taking in. And I think we need to know that, because those of you who deal with depressed people, angry people, fearful people, sad people, that's negative energy, electromagnetic energy, and you do want to try to protect yourself from that. Bottom line is, as far as we know now, Your energy follows your mindset and thoughts. So if you are thinking positively, have a positive mindset, you will be putting out positive energy. I always get tickled when I go to visit somebody and they've got this humongous dog. There was a Great Dane at somebody's house I was visiting to, and they said, wait a minute, let me get a hold of the dog. You know, we wouldn't want him to run you over. I'm looking at the dog. I walk in the house. They introduce me to the dog. The dog comes up, plants his front feet on my shoulders, and licks my makeup off. And they're grabbing a camera. They said, we've never seen him do anything like this. I'm thinking, well, I'm having a good day. Positive electromagnetic energy. Animals are really, really sensitive to it. So, I don't know, whatever. I've had lots of fun with Bill and Barbara's dogs. My goodness, they're humongous. We were driving home from the airport. Bill's talking to her on the phone. She says, I'm giving the puppies a bath. Okay, this is what I expected. They're small horses. They like me. What can I say? So here comes the question that I think we need to ask each other. Well, rephrase that. We need to ask ourselves that. What are you putting out? There have even been times when I wondered if Pakistan is our fault. Is the United States putting out so much negative electromagnetic energy that it's impacting the people in Pakistan? It's never destroyed, don't know where it goes out in a straight line somewhere. That's probably far-fetched, but I think about that. So if you are putting out negative energy, you're impacting your brain and body first, because it will get impacted. You will feel worse and worse and worse. But then it goes out into your surrounding environment, the people in your home, the people at work, the people at the petrol station. I learned a new word, just got back from Australia. Finally got it. It's not a gas station, it's a petrol station. You know, people at church, wherever. You are impacting them by your energy. And if you are grumpy and controlling and angry and fearful and you name it, you're not going to have good relationships with them, because they're going to start avoiding you. Because guess what? The brain doesn't like to be subjected to negative electromagnetic energy. And so, who knows? Anyway, have you got it? Isn't that Star Wars stuff? I just think it's amazing. It's Star Wars in the real world. All right. I don't think I saw anybody getting up. I certainly didn't hear anything. I do want you to get up now and move around for 4 or 5 minutes while I change the slides, and we might save 5 minutes for questions.